Yeah, I listened to some of their more recent podcasts in partial preparation for this, and a couple things stood out. They attended, or I think Jesse attended Hereticon, which it turns out took place in Miami, which is where I am now. I left the Bay Area for here. We'll see how long, but it's too bad I missed that. That sounds interesting. But Jesse Single described Hereticon as sort of this confluence of kind of crypto and tech bros
Yeah,
with.
it was funded by Peter Thiel,
Oh,
and
oh yeah.
it was invite only. So I don't even know how. I think you just had to have like at least 100,000 followers on Twitter, or have some other meaningful splash to be brought into the club.
Okay. Yeah, my roommate Rachel, Rachel Haywire, I don't know if you guys have heard of her. She has a little Google blurb if you look her up. I guess that's how she got in. She couldn't attend the other day; she got sick. But all right, so invite only, and I guess if you're not a yeah, Jesse was saying about that it became a bit harder for him to get an invite because he's gone solo with the Substack, and it makes it even if you're quite successful, when you're not affiliated with something like Slate or whatever, it makes it a little harder for them to give you the thumbs up and take you seriously and say, yeah, yeah, you can come. So having
I don't, not that crowd though. Like the Hereticon, that is ostensibly like presents itself as a heterodox convention. So I don't think it cares whether you have
okay,
mainstream establishment cachet behind you.
In fact, I
Because
think it cares in the opposite direction. Like someone with mainstream establishment cachet
okay, so
would be an anti-signal.
they
yeah,
care
like
about
the people that were invited was I
institutions,
think
but they don't care
Colin
about.
Wright.
I'm sorry.
Uh, he's a biologist that has like his own Substack where he basically writes about the issue of gender identity and biological sex. Yeah, Jesse Single and Robbie Suave and a bunch of other people that kind of like occupy that sphere.
Okay, so to get invited to something like that, you don't need to have some kind of affiliation with some legacy or even non-legacy, news or opinion outlet. But you do have to be sort of singularly impressive, and it's something that they can look up.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that crowd does not care. Like Trey said, that they don't care about the legacy affiliation.
Yeah.
That's an anti-signal.
Yeah. I was when I was involved in this a company called Politics in Palo Alto. No, it's called Topics. It's just sort of like a lightweight Reddit. They host sort of like local news forums, even though they're doing it all from the Bay Area. Anyway, they try to branch out into covering politics, but with like a Silicon Valley spin, or the like. And this was about 10 years ago, and I got to go to CPAC, and yeah, they do care more about that institutional affiliation. Although the way things are going, I bet they're
When
just
did you
gonna.
go to CPAC?
This was 2013. It was March.
It would be a fun exercise to compare the guest list of CPAC 2013 to the guest list of CPAC 2021 or 2022.
Yeah, you know who's a huge deal at CPAC 2013 was Rand Paul. He was like, just, I guess because it was sort of hot off the heels of his dad being a big deal. They thought, well, I don't know, the apple can't fall far from the tree or something, and they like moved all their energy into getting behind Rand Paul.
I remember that very brief moment.
Yeah,
Yeah, but at least like with Rand Paul, like he's a senator, and
yeah.
you can argue that he's like a fairly consistent senator politically. So it makes sense to invite him. But when you look at the guest list now, like for this year, like they have Candace Owens, who's probably like one of the most prominent dumb individuals that consistently pops up
Do you think
in my area.
you think the guest list has started to move away from people actually serving in government, or at least the kind of think tank policy wonk world, and getting into, yeah, sort of like new media celebrities or people who are celebrities on their own? Someone like a Candace Owens. Candace Owens is at the Daily Wire, I think, or the Blaze, one of those. I forgot. So, yeah,
Yeah, but just look at what was it? The Republican National Convention was invited the Arkansas couple that went out into the front yard with an AR-15 and a pistol,
oh,
and because
I think
they
I think
gained that level of
I think it was
infamy.
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that's what is bandied about as like a a speaker that is like influential enough to move crowds
Yeah.
to attend an event.
Did you listen to Diamond and Silk's 3-hour symposium? No.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah, exactly. But people like that, these, in retrospect, what will be flash in the pan in most cases. But yeah, it's odd because you think of the right as sort of being just traditionally sort of behind the curve on virality or like flashiness, but they're kind of leaning into that in this really crass way. They're like the Bang energy drink of the of the two political parties or tribes right now. Like if the Democrats are Red Bull, they are Bang energy drink. And in fact, TPUSA had a little documentary on Bang energy drink as like a story of American entrepreneurial success. I'm like, really? So anyway, yeah, that was CPAC in 2013. I got to see Kennedy from Fox News up close, Fox Business. There was one. They have like this room at these things that are dedicated to various like booths at a county fair, like you'd see, but they're each kind of sort of specializing or there to talk about a certain single issue within conservatism that they care about. And I remember seeing one that was kind of anti. I believe not three strikes and you're out, but it was sort of like a bleeding heart conservative booth. There was a group there representing a kind of bleeding heart conservative stance with regard to prisons and jails and how easy it might be to end up there. And I know, Yassine, that's in your wheelhouse. What do you think of the right's attitude on law and order in general?
It's very opportunistic. So if you ask like, I guess like the pylons of the conservative movement about law and order, they'll probably, the conversation will gravitate towards the January 6th defendants and how they're treated as political prisoners by being denied bail before they're even convicted of a crime. And these are all fair criticisms, but these are issues that have been, screamed about for decades by now. But it only becomes an issue when a member of the tribe is affected by it. And this is a criticism I'll also levy towards Black Lives Matters. I generally support the policy position of BLM, but I do find that their myopic fixation on race gets them to ignore perfectly appropriate like scenarios of injustice that don't get as much attention because the victim's race is not it doesn't fit the preconception. So I just find it opportunistic. It also reduces like how much I find it earnest because it doesn't seem like it's genuine. It just suddenly people care about criminal justice reform, but only when their people are affected, which is not conducive to long-term change.
Yeah, I'm seeing some of that with the Freedom Convoy stuff, which is now peaked and it looks like it's turned around. But you saw some of these arguments in the Mott. People sort of brushing aside the act of blocking freeways and occupying streets for days on end. Now, I can't point to anyone specific, but I'm pretty sure in 2020, I recall them say, hey, listen, you do not block freeways. You do not have a right. It's Summer of Rage, BLM 2020.
Yeah, there's plenty of people that fell into that trap. Matt Walsh is an example.
Massage their opinion on that 2 years out. I'm like, wait a minute, where did that come from, right?
Yeah, Matt Walsh is an example where he said, like, no exceptions. Like, anyone that blocks a road should be arrested. And then he changed his tune. And he was, even when he was confronted with that apparent hypocrisy, his excuse was just like, yeah, I support it when it's the right thing to do, but I don't support it when it's the wrong thing to do, which is not that different from Arthur Chu's justification, where he says there's no wrong tactics, only wrong targets.
Yes, it was really, the Freedom Convoy was absolute boon to anyone who wants to argue hypocrisy on all sides of the political spectrum, because, or more charitably than I prefer to be, but more charitably, to argue that a lot of people's perceived tactical concerns are more accurately topical concerns. That is, when people are saying, oh, no, it's not okay to block freeways. Oh, it's outrageous that they're protesting in this manner, in this manner, in this manner. What many of them are actually saying, it turns out, is I do not like this cause, and therefore the things they do in support of this cause, I resent. And as soon as they like a cause, those tactics become reasonable and proportionate and defensible.
Yeah, you see you want to talk about hot takes. You saw the same thing unfold with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, where you have a Twitter account for Occupy Democrats. They retweet the news about how their Kyiv is distributing 10,000 automatic weapons for civilians. And people easily pointed out, it's like, you guys realize that you're supporting the Second Amendment, right? Or at least like some method of having civilians own ownership because they fear tyrannical oppression. But, everything gets viewed through the culture war, so there's no principles.
Fall back on an unconvincing. Well, I mean, the Second Amendment doesn't apply there. They don't have it there, so it's just different.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't. I mean, that kind of mirrors a conversation I had with a friend once who he will defend just the most kind of laissez-faire attitudes toward homelessness and open drug use in the Bay Area. But he goes back to Japan like twice a year because his wife is from there, and he just can't stop singing its praises. And I'm like, Japan wouldn't tolerate this level of disorder on the streets. And he said, well, hey, it's a different country, different culture. I'm like, well, I mean, that doesn't seem very satisfying to me. But anyway, people can come up with ways to square that circle in their head. But there's something at least, I guess, upfront and honest about just saying, well, yeah, I support Freedom Convoy because what they're ultimately aiming at with their protesting and making their grievances everyone else's problem, I align myself with. I agree with the end state, their end goals. So means are always debatable, right? And so I guess there's an honesty in that. But if you really stick to that, in a country that's based on sort of a rule of law within a pluralistic kind of a societal order, all kinds of people, even if you are religious, you've got different ways of pursuing religion. I don't think they realize just how problematic that is going forward. It just kind of destroys the certain shelling point that we all rely on almost reflexively.
Yeah, and you don't have to focus on just conservatives that do this. That's what happened with the ACLU after they supported the organizers of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. They helped file the lawsuit that prevented that march from happening. And after everything that went down, they got a lot of criticism from the Blue Tribe. And you saw the schism happen within the organization where they tried to figure out how they can dance around this issue without being honest and explicitly saying, we're going to support free speech for left-wing organizations, but not right-wing organizations. So they came up with like this mealy-mouthed justification saying, well, if guns are involved, then we're not going to be involved, which is not consistent, especially if you go through the organizations they have supported in the past. And if the Black Panther showed up, that means the ACLU wouldn't support them, which I don't think is the reality.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they will end up supporting them.
Yeah, it's all a pretext.
It turns out even that rule, if it's about guns, forget it. Even if that deviates from what their kind of core mission, even that ends up being turned on a dime, or turning on a dime rather. So,
right.
Yeah. The free speech, I never thought that I was about to say I never thought the left would abandon free speech, and I of all the dominoes to fall, I thought that would be like one of the very last. I actually thought they would switch their position on guns before they switch on speech.
The position on guns does seem to be switching. Go ahead, Tris. Sorry.
It's really funny actually to look at the left position on speech because they still have this instinctive defense of it, and specifically the case of book banning. That if they find some conservative politician who looks at some LGBT book or anything in that vein, immediately you have this huge bandwagon cheering on, we don't support banning books. If you ban books, you're our enemy. And you see this enormous tribal sympathy towards that. And
unless it's Andy No's book. Or Abigail
unless
Schreier's
it's
book.
unless it's Annie No's book or Abigail Schreier's book or the books that are not even really mentioned in polite company very often.
Yeah, like
these.
they can switch right back into 1985 Frank Zappa mode, like in a moment's notice. But the general shift has been obvious.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've just been noticing in the past few weeks, particularly around the book Mouse being removed from some curricula and stuff, there's been this upsurge in energy against book banning again. And it's been fascinating with the recent pivot on free speech to see, no, you can still activate these free speech centers. You can still activate this instinct. It's just specific to this one context, and those principles get thrown away as soon as any analogy to anything else becomes present.
Yeah. Tracy Woodgrains, I wanted to ask you something about education. I was listening to a portion of a podcast with Richard Hanania and Steve Sue recently, and Steve was claiming that Western Europe got the idea of meritocracy from China, in fact, like the focus on test taking and getting into good uni. Actually, the term uni I think is more Australia, but Anglophone in general. I was under the impression that this came from Germany, the kind of meritocracy and test, Europe's focus on test taking and meritocracy and higher education and all that. I was under the impression it came from Germany. Steve said that Western Europe got that from China. Do you know anything about that?
There are multiple potential early points for it, but definitely the origin of civilization relying on test taking was the imperial exam system in China and the systems related to that, where you had these very elaborate tests with massive consequences and extraordinary. You see these I've seen pictures of these ancient cubicle-like things stretching out for as far as the eye can see, full of all these ancient imperial exam takers. Things like that, as a frame of things that were happening. And yes, so there was for a very long time this test-based meritocracy in China determining who gets into these positions of influence. And there's been a recent push to frame this idea of test taking as white supremacy, this idea of meritocracy as this white colonial notion that, as you're saying, does not line up with the facts on the ground and the actual origin and the actual history of the event.
So related to white supremacy, the notion that the left are the real racists and they sort of turn traditional racial hierarchy on its head. I still actually question that. I think at their core, yes, what they're attacking when they say they're attacking whiteness or white supremacy really is kind of a set of ideas, and that real genuine racism still belongs more on the right than the left, despite everything we hear about identity politics. Because if you unpack a leftist on this, typically they're getting at something like bourgeois values, which they identify with whiteness. What do you think? What do you think the left or the progressives are the real racists now, or maybe effectively they are, but just sort of in the idea space, are they the real racists, or is the right really home to the real racists? What do you think?
Well, I think it's informative to look at what happens to far-right forums from Reddit after they get kicked off Reddit as one example of this. So you look at, for example, the .win network of sites, which started after the Donald got kicked off of Reddit and grew to encompass a lot of communities like Consume Product, which was originally about consumerism, and other right-wing spaces. You go to that network now, and there is an extraordinary amount of very, very blatant traditional racism. So Consume Product, for example, has become consumed by this idea that everything, this basically just standard issue anti-Semitism, finding the Jewish fingerprint on everything and talking constantly about how the Jews are in charge of everything and how they will be trying to help the N-words, race genocide, white people, so forth. Like, just everything you can imagine gets thrown into that. And I do think that there is very, very much alive this strain of traditional hardcore racism in segments of the right. I'm not saying that, that defines the right as a whole, but I have seen, I've been surprised by just how hard they will lean into it and go, as people would say, mask off with that in spaces where they are not monitored by the left, in spaces where they are free to speak their minds and say what they were actually thinking the whole time. Or some of them were. Not all, but there is definitely that strain alive and well.
I think it gets into a definitional issue as well. It depends what you mean by racism. I'm not doubting, I'm not casting doubt on like what tracing has observed in far right forums, but I also see kind of the discussion norms within those spaces as signaling more than anything else. It shows like that you're with it if you can bandy about anti-black or anti-Semitic memes or language. I don't know if it's necessarily a good um, good means of evincing that they're actually carrying racist beliefs. It might just be a way to signal affiliation.
Yeah. So on this topic, I actually want to refer to an episode of the Bailey podcast that you host, Yassine, and other people are guests here and there. The most recent one involved the subject was multiracial casting in television, and with the sort of a subtext, or not subtext, is the wrong word here, but kind of a related focus on are white people basically being kind of systematically scrubbed out of representation, or to the degree they're represented, it's only in a negative light. Now, you had a guest on who was defending that latter view, that whites are getting kind of scrubbed out, they're getting disrespected symbolically in these casting decisions. And you actually you did something very interesting. There was the voice of a Nigerian woman was actually a stand-in for the opinion of this white man. Hey, Dane chiming in here, post-production style. Let's hear a sample of that discussion right now with the Nigerian voice actress, rather.
Well, let's get into my position statement then.
Right.
My position statement, short, is that we must secure the existence of our people and the future of white children. And the reason I bring that up is because
that sounds familiar.
The reason I bring that up is because coming out of the mouth of literally anybody but a white person, a black person can say this, an Asian person can say this, anyone else can say this, and no one would bat an eye because, of course, anyone will feel that way about their people. But when a white person says it, hold on, that's not okay. And I think we're seeing this coming out in a big way in casting and media. We shouldn't forget how powerful media is for forming people's conceptions of the world.
Okay, back to the discussion with Yassine and Tracing Woodgrains.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had this guy who was white. His name is Ishmael. He presented essentially like a white nationalist or something close to that view, where he was concerned that there were white people erased from media portrayals. But because he wanted to maintain his anonymity, we hired a Nigerian actress. We just found her on Fiverr, and she redubbed the entire sound file that Ishmael contributed, and it was fairly easy. She was professional enough that like the dubbing was consistent, and so it was, I'm the one that does the editing. It was fairly easy to plug that in, and it fit really well.
Yeah, that's what I find fascinating, because it did sound like a voice actress, but then some of it it was so dead on accurate. Like no utterance was missed. It like even little incidental noises or you know half started sentences, that was all in there. Like
Yeah.
well, so that
Yeah,
made,
she was great to work with.
I thought it might have been synthetic speech, like really good synthetic speech.
Oh wow, no, definitely wasn't.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, she was a damn professional. She doesn't want to be credited because most of her work is with corporations. Like she does voiceovers for trainings and things like that.
Yeah.
And so what she did was like conduct. She created a transcript first, and then just like recited it based on the time.
Cool. Did she say anything about? Did she give you any thoughts on the subject, like off the record or anything? Was she like, this is a little
No,
bit?
I sent her the episode and I asked her if she wanted to be credited, and she declined. So I'm
Yeah.
gathering that there's some apprehension on her end, but I didn't get any sense. She also, I mean, it was probably weird because she only received like the voice channel of Ishmael, so she didn't get to hear the rest of the conversation until everything was edited.
Oh yeah, and then you plugged it in, as you said. Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was not that hard. I mean, it worked out really well. I think it sounds natural, but it was not that difficult primarily because of how well of a job she did.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I'm going to plug in here is a sample of that, if you don't mind. Just
Yeah,
like
that's fine.
a couple sentences, so the listeners here can hear what we mean. But yeah, so with that said, it's been about an hour. I think I'm going to wrap it up. Do you guys want to say anything else?
Trace,
Um,
did you want to say anything
nothing.
else?
Nothing in specific comes to mind, but it's been a pleasure to chat about these things.
Yeah. Nice talking to you guys.